This is going to be the first part in a 7-part series where I will be discussing all of the old games that I played in the past 3 years. And the reason I'm making this a series as opposed to releasing one large video is because I didn't really want to just disappear for months and come back with a self-indulgently long video. I'm not H-Bomber guy. So I'm doing this not only because it'll be easier for me, but also because I think these work as individual essays in their own right. So I think it'll be good to experience them as individual parts and then later seeing the sum of the entire piece. So here is the first part about Max Payne and Levity. So, at the height of the pandemic in 2020, I decided to try some of the games that I have missed out on or never had the chance to play in my several years of playing games. The main reason was because they're cheaper than buying new games, but also I just wanted to try them. The first game I ever played was Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. I grew up with each and every hardware producer, so I experienced a very wide range of game genres and graphical styles, and I never had a preference for any one in particular. The perks of having divorced parents. Although there was one console I neglected, and that's the PC. To me, it was exclusively the flash game console. That is until I got my first gaming laptop in 2018, which was a waste of money. It's ironic because I exclusively played on consoles growing up, and now I barely touch them, except to play Luigi's Mansion for the nth time. I not only got to play PC exclusives that I missed out on, but also emulate classics that I never experienced beforehand on older consoles. This is going to be a series about all the things I learnt about video game design, and why these specific games have stayed in the memories of gamers from the perspective of someone who has no nostalgia for them. This video has taken so long that the original title was Playing Old Games in 2020, but to be honest, I'm glad that it took so long because in that time I have played a lot more games that actually taught me the most. Something that I noted often while playing these games is I can't believe this came out when it did, and that's a point that is integral to this project. Has the medium of video games as an art form actually evolved over time, or are we still where we were 2 decades ago? I wish to explore how the video game industry has changed or how it hasn't changed, and why that's not a good thing. This series does include every old game that I played, only the ones that stood out to me the most, and this is in order of when I played them and not in released order. Also, I am defining old games as games that were released over a decade ago. There will be some spoilers for all of the games that I'll be talking about, but if you haven't played them yet, this is your chance to do what I did 2 years ago. There was something disturbingly familiar about the letter before me. The handwriting was all pretty curves. You are in a YouTube video. The truth split my skull open, a glaring green light washing the lies away. All of my past is just fragmented YouTube clips. Images hanging in the air like a projector screen. I was in a YouTube video. Funny as hell, it was the most horrible thing I could think of. I had known of this franchise for a long time, but several years ago, after seeing a Let's Play of Max Payne 3, I just knew I had to get it. So I got it on the Xbox 360 and I loved it. So much so that I got stuck in the final boss fight and gave up on it. In 2020, I bought Max Payne 3 on the PC and fell in love with it again, actually finishing it this time. For a while, I considered the other 2 games as outdated relics that could never live up to the amazing gameplay of the third, but after refunding Assassin's Creed Brotherhood on Steam, long story, I'll get into it in a later video, I saw that a bundle of Max Payne 1 and 2 was $6 and decided to get that alongside Assassin's Creed 2. Again, long story, isolation really fucked me up. I found out that not only do they hold up, but they are the perfect representation of the video game industry in the early 2000s. I was still right that they don't hold a candle to the gameplay of Max Payne 3, but that's beside the point. Max Payne is the ultimate embodiment of B-movie in video game form. It's a B-game, if you will. A mishmash of noir cliches and film school influences that come together to form a surprisingly profound deconstruction of the source material. The way Sam Lake writes is so distinct as it borders on kitsch and Shakespearean prose and quality.
The Finito brothers.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pain in the butt. Pain to the max.
You're killing me. You make that up yourselves, or you get some wine out downstairs to come up with it?
And that's what makes Max Payne so memorable. That style is still present in all of Sam Lake's games. I have since played Alan Wake and Control, and both of them were just as good, if not better, in terms of writing and meta-narratives. Sam Lake is now my all-time favorite video game auteur. The reason Sam Lake's style works so well in Max Payne is because it feels in tune with what games are. It's like they were trying to make a film out of a game. What I mean is, it treated player expression not as a byproduct of the video game medium, but as a feature, something to take advantage of. They treated it as a fundamental part of the art form. By player expression, I don't just mean having the ability to interact, but the ways in which players make their own fun in a game. My main problem with contemporary single-player games is that they tend to force the player into a story, whether that be through cutscenes or unskippable dialogue sequences or long sections of walking slowly. This is an unfortunate byproduct of the travesty that was and still is The Last of Us. Storytelling is solely done on the developer's terms, which can work occasionally, but doesn't take full advantage of the medium it's trying to tell its story through. The reason people have remembered these games for so long is that they felt like personal experiences, not experiences carefully curated by a large conglomerate of developers, writers, artists, QA testers, executive producers, and CEOs who make absurdly more money than any of them. Unfortunately, since capitalism was invented by Joe Biden, the medium of video games has slowly been consolidating into the biggest publishers, and so the mainstream market for games feel less like passion projects made by a team consisting of maybe 20 people at most, and more like the Las Vegas Strip, meticulously designed to take the most money out of you. In other words, the game was rigged from the start. Wait, where was I going with this? Oh, right, Max Payne. Fitting. So the writing in Max Payne is intentionally campy because they know that players are going to have their own fun and aren't going to take the story as seriously as the developers intend. They also let you skip all the dialogue if you want, and it gives you the option to gain more context by interacting with some things, but you're not forced to experience those. That doesn't mean they didn't put any care into the narrative, because that's objectively false. The story is about a hard-boiled detective who ultimately fails in bringing down the same systems of power that took away his wife and child. And yet, he calls himself a winner in spite of that, almost as if the developers are acknowledging the player enjoying their time with the game, as if the lead writer is smiling right at you. Max Payne 2 has a much better story, but also feels a lot less memorable. It could be because of the lack of Sam Lake as the face of Max, or the more serious tone, but it still provides a great ending for the story. It's a very ambitious departure from B-game to an actual attempt at a noir story, and it succeeds, almost. The arc that Max goes through is much more profound and intriguing, but it fails to connect with the player as the first game did. The gameplay certainly improved, but the game parts started to feel dissociated. There were several segments that were downright infuriating and ultimately felt like padding because they needed to make the game longer. Even still, Max Payne 2 is significantly shorter than both 1 and 3, and yet it feels the longest out of all of them because of how poorly paced these segments are. There were moments where it felt as if that dissociation was intentional. The amusement park specifically feels like a commentary on the medium itself, an out-of-body experience for both the developers and the player.
A funhouse is a linear sequence of scares. Take it or leave it is the only choice given.
This idea of fate permeates throughout the entire game. It's almost as if where the first game embraced its identity as a video game, the sequel instead critiques it, and denies the player's satisfaction at every turn.
Vlad was right. There are no choices. Nothing but a straight line. The illusion comes afterwards, when you ask why me, and what if. When you look back, see the branches, like a pruned bonsai tree, or a forked lightning. If you had done something differently, it wouldn't be you. It would be someone else looking back, asking a different set of questions.
The thing that sticks out to me the most about Max Payne 1 and 2 are the reality bending segments. They feel so separated from everything else, and yet feel distinctly Remedy. They are obviously taking influence from the surrealist style of filmmakers like David Lynch, but they are so out of place in the gameplay and the narrative. These segments I don't think add very much to the experience. They're at best unmemorable and at worst not fun. Max Payne 2 does it somewhat better than the first, and it's not a horrible idea overall, but they don't really fit in this genre, and Remedy clearly did it better in later games. Overall, I think Max Payne 2 is a story for Max Payne and not for the audience. He gets his resolution at the end, and the player is meant to accept it and leave him alone.
I had a a dream of my wife. She was dead, but it was all right.
Until Rockstar made a third game, that is. Max Payne 3 is a complete departure from charm to toxicity, which can be seen in both the game and the situation in which it was created. No longer being written by Sam Lake means that the voice is drastically different, despite having the voice actor for the protagonist literally embodying him. Max is no longer the tragic rogue cop, but a clueless bodyguard. The story is no one's. The cynicism is directed at a vague disdain for contemporary culture and rich people. There's no sense of subversion or challenge of the tropes that make up noir stories. There's no deeper comment on the nature of video games. It becomes more dissociated than ever. The unskippable cutscenes want the player to care about the story, but the improved game feel and mechanics want the player to care about the copious amounts of killing. There's not enough consistency between both aspects to care about both simultaneously. I chose to care about the shooting because that was the most attention-grabbing. The amount of resources put into the detail of killing is what ends up being the game's identity. If only there wasn't a pesky story in the way. If the same amount of time was shared towards the detail in the writing, maybe it would be a more cohesive experience. Textual integrity is something that I mentioned in my Dying Light 2 video. When people talk about ludonarrative dissonance, they are actually talking about textual integrity, which is a more niche concept, but is essentially when a text explores a theme or idea across every aspect of their form and language. And this is a perfect example of a text without integrity. None of the themes tie into one another through all aspects of their form. Also, I believe this concept only exists within my Year 12 English curriculum, but I guess I'll just bring it into the video essays lexicon. Although, perhaps there is one theme that is consistent throughout the entire game, and that is taking control away from the player. For example, the way that it uses cutscenes constantly to show you information that is completely unnecessary and could have been shown through just regular gameplay. But not only that, the same thing occurs while you're playing the game. Rockstar developed a new technology called Euphoria, I believe, that allowed for characters to move and ragdoll with realistic body physics, meaning that instead of Max following your inputs, Max instead takes your suggestions into account and thanks you for shopping your calls. While this does add to the realism, it also takes away from player agency, as you always have to take Max's emotional state and old age into account when controlling him. This isn't only a minor inconvenience, mind you. When you're in Last Stand mode, which is like the second win mechanic in Borderlands, you have to rely on Max being in a convenient position to kill the guy who shot you before time runs out. And on several occasions I would be forced to restart from a checkpoint because Max's body was in the wrong position to shoot the enemy. This disconnect from player and game is a constant struggle that the previous games avoided, and as a result were more complete experiences. Max Payne 3 wants to be a cynical deconstruction of the American hero.
Well done with your effort. The whole city is grateful. The great American savior of the poor.
That's right.
But it also wants to be a fun shooting game where you kill people of color and Italians, and in Pride Month no less. There's an inherent contradiction that permeates throughout the story, and by the end I can only feel dumbfounded that Max achieves a happy ending. Max Payne 2 earned its ending, but this feels sloppy and contrived. I've still played dozens of hours of it, and I will continue to play it, but that doesn't invalidate the problem. Games should be a conversation between artist and audience in a more active sense than that of film and books. The brilliance of this new medium is that it equalizes the importance of both voices. The Max Payne franchise perfectly represents the progression of how the industry changed and how games have regressed in the process, which is conveniently a perfect starting point for this project. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please tell me what I got wrong or what I could have changed in future projects. Also, if you do like this content, I would really like to encourage you to check out my Patreon page, which I know is kind of stupid for a channel with not much exposure, but I really would like the support right now. I am currently struggling a bit with finances, and I only just got a job very recently, so I would really appreciate if you could check it out. Right now I only have 2 tiers. One of them is just $1 a month, and it's just if you don't have that much money to give me but you still feel like doing something, I'd really appreciate that. I also have a $5 tier where you can gain access to my scripts and to early edits of my videos, and if I have enough support, I will eventually try to release an update video every month, just going through what I'm working on and kind of my opinions on recent things. But yeah, so even if you can't give anything, I would really appreciate if you could like this video and maybe comment on it so that it gains more attention. But yeah, thank you so much for anyone who has watched my videos, and I really hope that you can support me in any way that you can. And I'll see you in the next one.